Good morning, class. I hope everybody is doing well. I had a couple of questions about this week's lessons. Just so you know, this week's lessons are kind of like a trial run. Starting next week, we'll be doing this for actual graded assignments. You'll most likely be given about 2 assignments a week. Each of those assignments will be graded. And then I'll provide feedback for them and give back to you in order to get prepared for an assessment. We will be having an assessment each week, and each week the assessment will just be based on that weekly topic. So from those 3 grades, your 2 classwork grades and your 1 assessment grade, I will compile all 3 of those assignments together and put into the actual grade book for just one single weekly grade, and that starts next week. So this week it is super, super important that you send me your work for these assignments. Any student who does not send me their work, your name will be emailed to an administrator and they will be contacting you just to make sure everything's okay, just to make sure you guys have internet access and computer access because we obviously we can't do this in the classroom, so we have to make arrangements for doing this at home. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these examples. So you should at least be able to submit these. I'm going to go through question numbers 1, 4, and I'm going to start question number 5 for you. We're not going to finish it though. Okay, so all of this is factoring. The good news is we actually learned how to factor in class. The video that was posted for you was a different method, so if you choose to do that method, that's perfectly fine. We learned how to do that open rectangle method that has that X as well. So I'm going to show the method that I taught you, but once again, if you found the video to be pretty useful, then obviously you can use that method. And a couple of you guys, probably about 10 of you, so about 25% of my students have already submitted the work, which is super fantastic. Make sure you guys submit this to me before spring break starts, so just Wednesday at the latest. And always, please email me if you have any extra questions. So first thing I want to do when I'm factoring is make sure everything is in standard form. That means my ax squared, my bx, and my c term are all on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm good. So first thing I want to do is label a, b, and c. If you remember, a is always the coefficient of the x squared term, so that's a 3. B is always the coefficient of the x term, that is a -2. And c is always the constant, which is a term without a variable, which is a -8. The unfortunate news here is a is not 1. So I actually have to do a little bit more work. I can't just jump right down into my solutions. And remember, we're not just factoring, we're solving. So our final answer is going to be x equals something and x equals something if there are 2 solutions. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, since a is not 1, we have to come over here and do a times c. So if I take 3 times a -8, that gives me a -24. All right, so I do a times c, 3 times the -8, that gives me a -24. I'm now looking for the 2 numbers that multiply to get -24, but those same 2 numbers add to get -2. So a characteristic about a negative AC value is one of my numbers is going to be negative, the other one has to be positive. So you don't have to pick the correct one first, you just want to list some pairs. So I'm making my little T chart over here. And I'm looking for some pairs of numbers. Remember, if we're doing that x, we have my AC value up top, -24, and I have my B value at the bottom. Remember, B goes at the bottom, and I'm looking for those 2 numbers that multiply to get this, but those same 2 numbers add to get this. All right, so if I check like a -6 and a 4, and I add those 2 numbers, I actually get -2, so I chose the correct pair first. If you picked -8 and 3, yes, those do multiply to get -24, but they add to get -5, so that's when you know you're not choosing the correct factor pair. So since I luckily picked those 2 numbers first, I just write them right here. I like to box these off so I have them in my brain, quick, easy visual. Okay, now we're doing the open rectangle. All right, remember, these 2 numbers get placed inside of the rectangle, right? Inside of the garage. And remember, AX is always at the top. In this case, A is 3, so I have a 3x and a 3x. All right, I want to circle these 2 guys, and the last thing you want to do is look for a GCF. Oops, look for a GCF. So is there a number I can divide both 3 and -6 by? Yes, it is. I can divide this by 3 and I can divide this by 3. This gives me a negative 2. So one of my parentheses, one of my binomial factors is what it's called, is x minus 2, because 3x divided by 3 is just x, and then negative 6 divided by 3 is a negative 2. All right, looking at this second pair over here, this 3x and a 4, I can't divide 3 and 4 by the same number, so there is no GCF. So I just leave it as a 3x plus 4. There's only one last step, since if I told you to factor it, you would be done, but I want you to solve each of them. So now I need to take each of these binomials and do something called the zero product property. That just means I'm going to take them individually and I set them each equal to 0. And then I want to solve for x. So here I would add 2. I'm going to write my solutions over here. I get x equals 2. And I don't have to write it as a point. I can just write it just like that. Here I actually have to do 2 steps. If I'm trying to get x by itself, first thing I got to do is subtract 4. And I get 3x equals a negative 4. And then I divide both sides by 3. So I get x equals a negative 4/3. And those are my answers. All right, so we've done a billion of these examples in class. We spent over a week factoring. Just dig back in those notes that you guys hopefully have. I know a lot of you guys probably left your notes in our classroom, but that should be a decent example there of us going through it. All right, we're going to now skip across and do example number 4. Number 2 is very similar to number 1. Number 3 and 4 are very similar to each other as well. Okay, so first thing I want to do is I always want to make sure I'm in standard form. I cannot label A, B, and C like I did over here unless I'm in standard form first. So I need to move this term over to the left. All right, so moving a negative 11x, I need to add it. And make sure when you write this, you write that x term directly in the middle. So I have 6x squared plus 11x minus 10. Remember, it's always your a term goes first. A is x squared, b goes second, b is just x, and c is my negative 10. All right, let's label A, B, and C. Nothing changes here. A is a 6, B is a positive 11, C is a negative 10. All right, let's come over here. Let's do A times C. I get 6 times a negative 10, which is a negative 60. All right, I'm now looking for two numbers that multiply to get negative 60 and add to get a positive 11. Let's see what we have here. So we could do like a negative 30 and a 2, but that adds to get negative 28. That's not good. I could have like a negative 10 and a positive 6. That adds to get a negative 4, so that's not good either. Let's try, what about 15? So what about a negative 15 and a positive 4? That adds to get negative 11. I'm close because I want a positive 11. So if I just switch these two signs and do a positive 15 and a negative 4, I finally get that 11 that I'm looking for. All right, so that's my magic factor pair there. And guys, it's honestly trial and error. Like, even I didn't know right off the bat that it was 15 and negative 4. I need to experiment a little bit. Okay, so we got our two numbers, so we're gonna come over here, we're gonna make our garage, right, that open rectangle, put the 15 and the negative 4 down here. Remember, AX goes up top, so it's gonna be a 6X and a 6X. All right, I'm looking at these two guys individually now, and I'm looking to see if I can reduce them. Both 6 and 15 can be divided by 3, so I get 6 divided by 3 is a 2, 15 divided by 3 is a 5, so that's that binomial in simplified form. And then 6 and negative 4, I can divide both of those by 2. 6 divided by 2 is a 3. Negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. All right, and if I told you to factor, you would be done, but you want to solve each using factoring. So now I need to do that zero product property. Take each of these guys right here, 2x plus 5, set it equal to 0. Let's subtract 5. Sorry, I'm running out of space here. We get 2x equals a negative 5. And divide each by 2. So I'm going to write my answers just right here next to it. I get x equals a negative 5 over 2. It's perfectly fine to have a fractional answer. That's one of my solutions. I now want to do the exact same thing with this 3x minus 2. I'm going to write it over here because I have no space. I wrote way too large. So we get 3x minus 2 equals 0. Let's add 2 to both sides. 3x equals 2, and then lastly divide both sides by 3. So my other answer is a positive 2/3. All right, two answers, right? A positive 2/3 and a negative 5/2. Please, please, please leave your answers as fractions. Do not write a decimal. This as a decimal is that ugly 0.66666. It just keeps going on forever. You don't want to round it. Just write it as a positive 2/3. All right, last one, guys. We're going to set this one up. And then I want you to go through and solve it. Remember, you guys are sending this to me. Take a picture of your work. You don't have to print this out. My printer was being a little fussy this morning. I almost just did this on a separate sheet of paper. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure your name is on that paper and the assignment title is. So for example, you would say whatever your name is, and then you would say factoring to solve assignment, just so I know exactly what you were sending me. All right, so it says the length of a rectangular sign is 3 feet longer than the width. All right, so we have 3 feet longer than the width. All right, so I know that my length, I'm just going to label my variables here, is, and my width is, I'm just going to say my width is x. If my length is 3 feet longer than my width, I just know that it's x plus 3. 3 additional feet compared to what my width is. So if you wanted to draw a picture, here's my little rectangle here. I have my length is an x plus 3. I know my width is an x. And then I know that the area, the entire side, like if this entire thing was shaded, this entire space is 54 feet squared, right? 54 feet squared. Okay, so I need to figure out what the units of the length and width are. When you're calculating area, remember area is length times width. So all I have to do is set this up. I know my length is x plus 3. So I have x plus 3 times my width. I know my width is x, length times width. And I know that it's going to equal an area of 54 feet. All right, what I want to do is I want to take this little equation right here and I want to make it look something like this up here. I want to make it look like an equation of a quadratic in standard form. So the first thing I want to do on this left-hand side is I want to distribute. X times x is x squared. X times 3 is a positive 3x. And I still have my 54 on this right-hand side. Now this problem is almost identical to question number 4. I just have to bring that one term over to the left. It's a positive 54, which means I need to subtract it. So get x squared plus 3x minus 54 equals 0. Everything is on the left-hand side. So now what I want you guys to do with this problem is to factor it like we just did. Good news is a is 1, so hopefully if you remember that little shortcut, it's not nearly as much work. And then make sure you're solving it and telling me what the width and the length are. Don't just tell me what x equals, you need to tell me what that means, width and lengthwise. All right, guys, I'm going to post this here in a couple seconds. Make sure you communicate with me through Google Classroom this week, whether it be you asking a question, whether it be you sending in an assignment. I need full participation, or like I said, I have to email an administrator and we have to figure out what the problem is. All right, guys, hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye.